Hi, and welcome to the Spooky Hours. My name's David Saunderson, and today we're talking to paranormal investigator Beth Darlington. How are you, Beth?
I'm good, David. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you coping in lockdown?
It's a challenge. It's a challenge. There's obviously a lot more time for reading and researching and watching some great interviews and listening to some great podcasts.
Yeah, well, you've just recently come to live in London from Sydney. It's probably not the best time for someone who wants to get out there. That's been a little bit disappointing, isn't it, that you've not been able to get out and see some of the places you've wanted to?
It has been very frustrating. There was a couple of investigations I was going to be a part of with the Ghost Club that were in certain locations, and I was very much looking forward to that. And obviously, I've been on one with them, and of course, obviously want to explore more. And it was obviously one of the very big reasons why moving back over to the UK was to be able to do this more actively as well. So, I guess it just has to change tactic and kind of go with the whole reading and researching side first a bit more before getting out there again.
Well, you're still getting out there. You last week you ran the Paranormal Investigators virtual conference. Was really big. It was all day, full of investigators, and I saw some of it. I didn't have the stamina to watch. I think you had about 10 hours worth of interviews there. That was exciting. How did you come to pick those people that were in that? And people can still see the on your YouTube channel. So we'll point to there at the end, so you don't need to go looking for it now. You wait till afterwards. So, how did you come to find those very, very interesting people?
I have been wanting to do this for years. I've been to America about eight times in 8 years. Each year I'll go. Unfortunately, this year was going to be slightly different now, but I get so much from learning from other people. It's almost like a rabbit warren. You meet one person, they have another idea, or they present another idea or a speculation, and it just continues on. And I thought, geez, it'd be great to be able to find a platform to be able to run this on an online virtual perspective. Now, in other industries, they've been doing it for years. I mean, social marketing, all this kind of stuff. But for the paranormal, there's not really been a really good proper online conference. So I thought, well, why not make one? Because people have the time. I've already had the list of people, so I knew already who I was going to have, and people that I've researched and followed for years. And of course, you've got to have your odd sort of TV celebrity in there as well to kind of to break it up a little bit too. So. And it was great. It was really, really based on the content, not necessarily if people were well known or not, and also about experiences and making it broad. But people needed to bring something to it, something where people can get something from it and take away and use later on. Experiences, as I said, is great. And we had one person speak about their experiences, but it had to be stuff that people could actually utilize later on.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's interesting because often you could hear a great ghost story, but what does that mean to me other than a little bit of a shudder or oh, that's cool. You want a little
That's
bit more.
right.
A lot of the stuff I see you doing online, you do quite a lot of to the camera, like you're talking to now, talking to your friends back in Australia, talking to people that you've worked with. Uh, so it's certainly the COVID-19 experience has given us the kick up the backside to make sure that we're out there talking to people. What do you think that will lead to that paranormal investigator conference you did last week? Are you doing another one?
I've had quite a few requests for people saying, "Can you do this again next year?" And I think I only really sort of pencil that as a yes because I think a lot can happen between now and then. I'm not the only person that's now done it. There was one I was just recently a part of as well, and they've actually gone ahead and had a lot. It was for a 24-hour full stream as well. So that's
Yeah.
and they're exhausted. They've literally just finished it. So I think this is going to be an idea that's going to take off in other ways. And for me, I really like to keep it specialised. So it's a possibility. It's a possibility. I already have a list of people that I would have as other speakers as well and content because there's just so much great talent here in the UK, as well as also in the States and people that I've met when I've gone to conventions over the years and still kept in contact with. They're just all these beautiful areas of research and understanding that you would not have any idea that were around unless you had watched something like I did last week.
Yeah, you did a video for us a couple of weeks ago. You filmed and it was talking about the differences you found between the paranormal, well, not the paranormal world, because I suppose the paranormal world has to be the same everywhere, but the paranormal groups and things like that in Australia versus the UK.
Mhm.
Uh, and it kind of came down to basically there's lots more stuff here in the UK to do than there is Australia. And I find that myself, like I'm Australian, of course, and I do not recall. I think once in my entire life I went to one spiritual type thing in Geelong, there was nothing ever else. Maybe it was different in Sydney, where you're from. What is the culture like there for paranormal groups in New South Wales?
Oh, it's different and the same. And I know it sounds very, very sort of fence sitting. I found the paranormal teams in Victoria and Melbourne area to be a little bit more fractured. I think there was a lot more tension in between teams and investigators there. But then again, there was a time in New South Wales and Sydney where there was a lot of that going on. I think it's calmed down a fair bit now, particularly in the last couple of years before I moved over, which is really, really great. So I've found that's helped settle a little bit more, and I think people have sort of calmed down a bit, and that always helps.
You're making it sound like gang wars. I mean, I'd like to point out that I was never involved in any kind of paranormal groups in Melbourne or in Victoria, never mind Sydney, but I know whose side I'd be on if there was a gang war. It's also Australia's not that old. It's about 220 years old. It's probably, or however old it is now. It's probably 240, is it? I don't know. I can't remember. And so and I say that I mean, British settlements. So, buildings that you could go into. What kind of places did you investigate in Australia?
Well, I was very lucky to have a lot of really great friends that run paranormal events, so I was often a part of them. So sometimes I wasn't paid for the event. My sort of payment afterward was being able to investigate, even if it was a couple of hours afterwards when everyone had gone. So that was fantastic. So Parramatta Jail was one, because that closed down about 10-ish, 15 years ago. So obviously you've got to be very careful when you do run events about the information, how sensitive it is, because obviously it's just recently closed down. So you have to think about the people that are still around. What else? There's also Liverpool TAFE. TAFE being a college type of college in Australia. It's the building itself used to be an insane asylum. It's now a beauty college. Let's talk about contradictions right there, or maybe not. And then, other places, there's the Australian Pioneer Village, which is out in really out west of Sydney as well, which is kind of near where I was. And again, there were old buildings that they've kept from the colonial times. One in particular, I think it was built in 1880, that they've still got there. And they physically had moved it there, and they've kept it and preserved it. And there's a preservation society just for that building itself. But that particular location was used for film sets as well, and has been in the past. But yeah, there's a couple of places like that. And one thing I really like now, in the last sort of maybe 10-ish years when I was there, it started to develop because of the TV shows. Because before it used just to be your Rocks. Rocks is another area, old part of Sydney. Rocks tours, which were ghost tours, history tours. Great, awesome. But I want to be interactive. I want to get out. I want to get in there. And I'm so glad that actually started to filter out, and there were locations looking at doing more active investigating.
Okay. Were there places that you would have liked to have gone into, Sydney and the surrounding areas, you just couldn't get into just because the people wouldn't let you?
Oh, there are so many beautiful old buildings in the Rocks area that I would have loved to have gone into, because being the oldest sort of European, I call it unsettlement, area. There's so many beautiful old sandstone buildings like the naval bases. I'd love to do Fort Denison, which is that little area that's like a rock, basically. They've built a sort of a fortress, a mini fortress there. I would love to have investigated there as well. I mean, talk about having a location to yourself, but then of course you've got to be wary about the sound, because you're out in the middle of the elements and on the harbour type thing. So I was able to investigate HMAS, I think it was Vampire, I think, ironically enough the name was, and that was docked at Darling Harbour, and I was able to investigate that. But of course it was in party season, where it was all the Christmas parties, so all the sound from all the buildings was coming across a little bit. But yeah, there's so many other different places I would love to be able to get stuck into.
It's got interesting. You like in Sydney, you're sort of looking at, there's maybe so many places, but you could pick any kind of little village or any little town here in England, and you've got everything you want, which is probably the attraction of wanting to come here in the first place.
Yep. And now I can't just right now.
You can't, because of this little COVID-19 thing. What did you find when you did do your investigations there? Do you think you were hampered by the fact that you had, in your own development, the fact there was less to research maybe in Sydney?
I think there's, as far as documented history, it was so much harder to try and find out what happened on a particular location. As we know, beautiful Indigenous Australian people, their history is all by spoken word, not written. So getting that information is very, very difficult on a particular land, because it could be a combination of all different things. I mean, that's on the presumption that it's history that is the reason why there's a haunting. So yeah, there's definitely restrictions with regards to having such a longer history of documentation when it comes to looking at a possible haunting. Yeah, really.
Did you find any connections with the Indigenous culture when you were doing paranormal investigations?
I did. There was one case I was working on in a place in Penrith in Western Sydney, and there was a house that was having some very interesting phenomena, footsteps, and actually physically seeing an Indigenous Australian in the backyard with a spear. And at first I thought, well, this is going to be interesting because being able to speak to Indigenous Australians about the afterlife or their ancestors is a big no-no. I approached the Aboriginal Council. They said, we'll get back to you. They never got back to me.
Yeah.
Understandably, it's out of respect, and I know it was a big step to try and ask, but I was doing it from a place of respect. But luckily I also have a contact, and she's quite happy to talk about it. She's Indigenous Australian, and it was, I got so much valuable information about the beliefs of the afterlife, and that helped so much. But it's unfortunate to a point, but you just have to respect that. It's just so rare.
That's what it is.
Mm.
We had MJ Dixon talking about a similar. She grew up in South Africa, where the whole idea of ghosts or witchcraft or anything like that was completely, verboten. You couldn't speak about it. They kind of liked watching it on TV, but if you claimed to be involved in it, how did you find? Because I would find Australia not the kind of place that would sort of not into this kind of stuff like we are here in England. How did you find that?
I found that there are a lot of people in Australia that are, but because our population is so much smaller, it's harder to find those kinds of people. Of course, like here in the UK, once you find the community, then you've got your door in, and you find one person, and then you're able to. But in Australia, it's just such a much smaller community of it. But there's definitely people just as passionate.
That's right, because we don't really even celebrate Halloween there. I mean, it's seen as an American type of thing to sell sweets to lollies to children. It's not a
Yeah.
thing. So you really just think there's just not as many. There's like 25 million, 30 million people in Australia, and that's as many people as there are in London and the greater, the home
Yeah.
counties area. So yeah, that must be a really lot of fun for you then to come here. Assuming COVID-19 finishes at some stage and we can go back to doing it, what are your sort of grand plans for paranormal investigations? Because you must be literally in a sweet shop here.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's a sweet shop that I can't get to the jars, and it's annoying. The jars are looking at me going, hello, hello. Yeah, it is. There's lots of plans to get out and about. I want to get to, I have currently an investigation booked at the Ram Inn
Yep,
in
yeah,
July at the
the
moment.
ancient Ram Inn. Yep.
Ancient Ram Inn, yes, that's right. So we will see how we go over the next couple of days, what the government's deciding about how that's all going to happen.
Yep.
I've been approached about a couple of events happening in September and or October, which is
Okay.
also something that's kind of in the works, very early days. We'll see how that goes as well. So yeah, it's already some plans, but I think everyone's just kind of waiting to see a little bit more. And it's catch-22, isn't it?
It is a catch-22. Have you been doing anything because you don't need to go on a ghost hunt to do paranormal investigation? You can basically bring out your notepad and go visiting anywhere. Did you find yourself doing that just in the streets of London, or did you do anything like that just to get a feel for the place?
I think a couple of the buildings I've been in, I actually started to kind of go in and sort of sense a little. And that's not normally something I would do. But I think because I was starting to want to at least do something, I found a sort of like a breath of fresh air to be able to go into these places. And sometimes these places have such an atmosphere, you don't really have to sit there and go, now, what am I feeling? Like it was just literally just going in and go, wow, this place has such a beautiful atmosphere to it. I could wander through it. I almost feel like I'm in the costume of the day and wandering through and stuff like that. And that's why I love, literally London is full of buildings like that, and like you say, you don't have to just do an overnight investigation. You can just sort of wander in. Mind you, walking around with a voice recorder may have caused a bit of concern.
Yeah. So how did you get yourself involved in the paranormal in the first place? Sort of, we should have said that at the start, but we'll bring it at the end. How did you get into ghosts?
Well, ghosts got into me. No, I'm joking. It was something that's always been there. And I think a lot of people say that they've always had a fascination, or it's usually an experience. And for me, it's always just been a fascination. I remember from being the age of 16, I remember somebody at school claimed that they were psychic. And I remember sitting with her one time at lunch and just asking so many questions. How do you know these things? How would you pick that up? Why would you pick? And just little things like that. She was, obviously she was also bullied as well at school. Love school kids.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so that was always there. Also, the possibility of objects moving on their own when there's no physical reason that we can figure out now. Those are the kinds of things I was really fascinated by, and then the possibility of an afterlife. I had one. My grandmother on my dad's side was very open-minded, and then I had came from two very skeptical parents that just kind of laughed at me, my sister, thinking, it goes better punch me in the face for me to know it's there, kind of thing. It's silly kind of stuff. But yeah, it's always been there. And then I think it was when I was here 10 years ago, I started to watch those TV shows. Yes, but I liked the fact that was a possibility of getting out there and being more active in it, getting more involved in it, not just sitting there and observing or hearing about the history. And that just started. And at first it was about experience, which is like with most of us. I wanted to see if I could experience something. And then it's just grown from there. It's not about experience. It's about learning and seeing what else is out in our world.
So you were specifically influenced by the reality TV shows. That was what gave you the sort of the kick up the bum to be able to actually go off and do this stuff. Well, there is some positive things there for comes out of some of those reality shows. Were there anything like that in Australia though, or were there any? I can't remember if there was any paranormal shows in Australia like that. So you were getting all your stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
You got all your stuff from here, but you said you came back here before though. So your mother is English.
Yes.
So that's what you're doing. Did you have any kind of have you been to any of your ancestral places here to do any investigations since you've been here?
Not just yet, and I was planning to as well. My family grew up in Hatfield, and I want to go to Hatfield House and all those other. We're back to the house where my mum grew up and planted a little plant, which is now a great big massive tree in the front yard, and little things like that. So I've not had the chance yet, but that's one of the first things.
It's Hatfield. It's not very far away. It's in Hertfordshire,
no.
So you will be able to do that once we can get it out of here. So there is lots of excitement then. Yes, lots of excitement for you. I know you do a lot of videos talking about the paranormal. I'd love to get you back on and answer some of my questions. This was sort of just a get to know you type thing. Of course, I know you because I've obviously gone out to pubs with you in London since you've been here. But we'll continue this conversation another day. So you take care, and we look forward to hearing, hopefully that you can get out sooner rather than later and start achieving your dream of researching ghosties here in England.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, David.
Okay, see you, Beth. Bye-bye.
See ya.